The thing is, it's weird, man. Like, people don't respect you as much either if you're not whooping their asses. There's that too. It's true. It's real. It's real. People absolutely respect you when you mop the floor with them. You put them down, and like, what? And then you put them down, but that slowly disappears when you can't mop mats with them anymore.
Hello, friends. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Mayn Idea Podcast, where today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Robert Drysdale. If you want to see the show grow in 2024 and hear from more incredible guests, please take 30 seconds and leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. It is incredibly easy to do, and it helps tremendously with organic growth and show placement. And this is important to me because I want this show to grow from the listeners sharing it with other like-minded people who value strength and conditioning, human performance, and Jiu-Jitsu. Robert Drysdale is a 4th-degree Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt under Leo Vieira. He is both an IBJJF and ADCC world champion and celebrated author. He has written 2 important books regarding Jiu-Jitsu, Opening Closed Guard, and his most recent book, The Rise and Evolution of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which we discuss here. I hope that you enjoy this episode as much as I did. It's always a great time chatting with Robert. Without further ado, Mr. Robert Drysdale. Well, Robert, thank you once again for joining me, round 2. It's always fun to speak with people who've been on the show before, and we've got a lot more to talk about with the release of your second book, so I appreciate you taking the time to be here, brother.
Thank you, man. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be back, and it's a pleasure to be here.
So I'll hit you with what I find to be a somewhat controversial question. So I truly ask this with all due respect across all levels, but I can't stop but thinking about it after reading Opening Closed Guard and then your second book, because it really throws a needed wrench in the perceived history of jiu-jitsu, which we all love and practice so often. And that is, why do we have pictures of Helio on the wall in our academies?
Because when the revolution took place in 93 with Royce, the microphones went to Royce, Horion, and Hickson. And all 3 of them are children of Helio Gracie. So they had a 10-year start on the narrative. It wasn't until Helio Gracie, Roger's mother, wrote the biography of Carlos that a different version of events came about. That, there's this other guy called Carlos Gracie, by the way. Actually, right. His son, Carlos Gracie Jr., is one of the most important figures in this whole story. He's the president of IBJJF. He created the affiliation system. He's the president of Gracie Barra. Oh, I didn't know about those guys. What about all these other Gracies? So people start asking all these questions, but Horion had such a head start on everyone else that by the time people even began to ask those questions, it was already too late. The narrative had taken over. And, it's the story that people know is the story that Horion told or has been saying and telling from 93 up to today. And it's not necessarily wrong. It's just incomplete.
Is there, to do justice or to kind of level the playing field here on the history, do you think it's important for people to know this? Do you think it's important for people to act on it? Is it is important for the history and the future of jiu-jitsu that people accept and make these changes in their head and in these narratives? Or is this just kind of something that's happened and it's behind us now and we move forward?
I mean, it is as important as knowing that George Washington was a leader in the Revolution. It's as important as knowing that Thomas Jefferson was there too. I mean, like these things, you can ignore it and say history doesn't matter. I only care about the present. But, I talk about this in both my books. Like there's a thread there that unites these themes, like where we were. Yeah. You cannot separate where we were from where we are and where we are from where we will be. It's one common path. I think that a lot of people that are into jiu-jitsu are in for the moment, for the fun of it, the Instagram, the medal here and there, take some pictures, get a good workout with your friends. They're not really into the art, right? They're just like occasional practitioners. Tomorrow they switch over to a different hobby. They're like taekwondo, rock climbing, I don't know, video games, something else. But then you get the people that are true to the roots and that will be in jiu-jitsu their entire lives. People like myself, I'm not going anywhere. I plan on teaching jiu-jitsu till the day I die. I mean, I think to me it's important to know where I came from, so I actually have some sense of direction. I think that's the real contribution of history, of accurate history telling. Which is to say that we are given direction and purpose of where we're going to go next. Like I've picked fights with half the world because I could see these patterns reoccurring. It was like, I know where we're going. This is bad. And people get angry because you're messing with their prestige and their power and their money now. So, you pick up fights with people. But, to say that the ill of every historian is that every historian wants to be a prophet, and it's a big, big flaw that everyone who studies history has. You want to be able to predict what happens next. And because history is reoccurring, there are patterns, right? But we don't know what's going to happen next, but we definitely see some reoccurring patterns, and it's very cyclical. It's very interesting.
Hello, friends. Listen up for 60 seconds while I share my brand new show sponsor, Parry Athletics. I've been a trainer for over 10 years and worn every pair of athletic shorts from Lululemon and Rhone to 10,000 and Nike, and I can confidently say that there is no training short that matches the quality, durability, and style of Parry Athletics. What makes Parry special, besides their slick style rooted in jiu-jitsu, skateboarding, and Olympic weightlifting, is something called GSM, or grams per square meter, which refers to the weight of the fabric that you're training in. Unlike flimsy shorts that tear every time you touch a barbell, Parry is built to maximize performance by resisting damage and stretching to your thick thighs' desire. Squat deep and feel the freedom. The shorts that I love are the 5-inch comp short, which are 160 GSM. They move well, look good, and transition between strength training and sparring seamlessly. Parry is also the only brand that I trusted to manufacture the show rash guards, which one listener hailed as, quote, the best rash guard they've ever worn. To snag your training shorts without breaking the bank, use the code MAYN, that's MAYN, at checkout for 15% off your entire order. And pursuing through both of these books, this is hundreds of hours. The way that you write, it shows that you don't just do this off the cuff. This is research, and research takes a lot of time. There's also interviews. Coordinating interviews takes a lot of time. So this is on top of a career as a martial artist, someone who's competed at the highest levels and someone who teaches still to this day. You're investing a lot of time into this truth-seeking aspect. Why do you feel drawn towards that?
I mean, I think there is a common thread that unites my passion for jiu-jitsu and my passion for history. And I'm not saying I'm perfect in this regard or I don't fail, but right. It's, the reason I was drawn to jiu-jitsu is that it was real. You can't BS your way on the mats. You can't market your way into being the best guy on the mats. You can't you can't go like, oh, I have a ton of followers and I'm famous and I'm rich and I'm important. I got all these friends and I'm friends with the mayor and all these celebrities. Yeah, but you just got your ass kicked by a 15-year-old. You suck. You can't talk your way around reality. It's the truth. Jiu-jitsu is about the truth. It's right there. I mean, you can pretend and you can pose and you can take pictures and act tough. I've had many times I've seen this guy, every single picture, tough guy, super tough. I'm like, oh, must be really tough, right? And then you put him under pressure and he breaks every single time. And I'm going, not so tough after all, huh? So the truth is revealed on the mats. It's empirical. It's scientific. You can't talk your way around you being something you're not. You see people run, and I've seen that. Every time they see a challenge on the mats or in real life, what do? They run in the opposite direction because they prefer the pretension over the challenge. I'm like, you're not a real martial artist. A real martial artist would run at the challenge, not hide behind the pretension. I see this all the time. It's disgusting to me. It's disgusting. I hate it. I pick a fight with people with this every day. I've picked fights with students. I've picked fight with strangers. Because I'm not wrong. I think that merit is the ultimate metric here. And jiu-jitsu, in theory at least, is about that. Well, so should be history. I don't care about what you talked about or what the marketing that went behind it. I don't care if 1 million people believe something. What are the facts of the matter? Now there is a way. I mean, I'm not one of those that say you can actually get to the truth with history. I understand these things are complex in their perspective. But I think that the barometer here of good history is like how close can you get to the facts free of your politics, free of your passions. I didn't enter this being anti-Gracie or pro-Gracie. I don't enter this being Brazilian or anti-Brazilian or pro-American or anti-American. What are the facts of the matter? My loyalty is to how can I be a competent observer of these facts and report them in a way that doesn't, place my favorite people on the top. And as a result, you can upset some people because it's people have their own self-interest in these events, and but I mean, to me, it's the truth is that's where goodness comes from, man. Like you're not going to get. I mean, whatever you're going to build, whatever you're doing, it doesn't start with a lie. If it's meant to be good, if you have good purpose behind it, if it's meant to build, you don't start a house with a flimsy foundation made out of Play-Doh. You're going to build a house. The foundation better be solid. And I think the history of jiu-jitsu should be the same. So I'm not trying to diminish anyone here. I'm trying to let's try to rectify this building and say, if this is going to be the greatest martial art in the world, let's start with telling its history accurately. The story is incredible as it is. There's no need to exaggerate, aggrandize, or detract from anyone. Just tell the facts as they are. The facts are good enough.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to accept that something that you see one way might actually be different. I think that's why I've enjoyed both of these books. I came into this as a hobbyist, someone who was looking for an outlet for physical strength and ability. I wanted to try something where I could test myself, right? And jiu-jitsu is this perfect thing because, to your exact point, it shows you who you are really quick. And it strips you down from all the things that you thought about yourself because you can't lie. There's no lying about pressure, about someone else's skill set in comparison to yours when theirs exceeds yours. Good luck. It's true. And there was something special about that. But when you have an experience like that and it changes you on a moment, you tend to, I think this is the reason why people have such profound experiences in religion, right? They have this aha moment, and then they're all consuming of everything. They just accept everything that comes their way after that moment. Yeah. So you come in, you find something like jiu-jitsu. It's really powerful. It changes the way that you see yourself. It makes you think differently about who you are. Yeah. Then you get the story of it, and you go, oh, my God, this is a miraculous story, and you accept it all. Then 5 years later, because you love this, you read these books, and you go, oh, wow, this is quite different than I thought it was. And then you have this odd moment in your journey or whatever. But it's important to do that. I urge people to read these books if you're a martial artist in any capacity, because they just show you another angle to something that you're participating in, if nothing else, right? Yeah. And that's special.
To your point, man, I could see why some people get offended. I don't know how many enemies I made. I made a lot of interesting people through these books. There's zero regret because I have made friends all over the world, super interesting people that wrote me. And I'm like, that alone was worth the effort, Right. But I'm sure I made some enemies because people associate their positive experience with jiu-jitsu with the story. So when you question the story, because they attach these two things, right? They go, oh, you're questioning my entire life here. Like, I don't like you anymore. It's a religious experience. It's similar. Yeah. That's a great analogy. Yeah, it's like questioning dogma, and these guys have been put in pedestals, but their stories have been unquestioned. Now, I mean, guys like Helio are fundamental to the history of jiu-jitsu. I'm not suggesting otherwise. I'm the first one to say it. Like, he's a centerpiece in this story of how jiu-jitsu came to be as we understand it today. With that being said, there's a lot of things that got spun on their head here. Like the story is almost entirely out of their own mouths. Like, and this is not me being political. This is a methodological stance. Like, if you're telling a story, let's say you're a refugee. I suppose you're a refugee, and you had your homeland destroyed, your country destroyed. You're fleeing. You're trying to make it into a new country, and some reporter asks you, "So what was it like during the war?" Is that a reliable witness? No, he's a victim. But is that a reliable witness? It's not a reliable witness. I'll tell you why. Because they're so consumed with hate over what happened that they will say, were they murdering children? Absolutely. Were they raping women? Yes, 100% they were. Now, they didn't see that happen. But they might say that they did. You know why? Because they're so consumed by anger. So that is, when you're telling these stories, people are so passionate about their version of events because they love Helio so much, or they love Carlos so much, or they love Carlson so much, or anyone, that they'll literally distort events. They'll lie, they'll aggrandize, they'll detract, they'll do anything to make sure that the person they love or they walk toward the same direction their passions are leading them to. So their passions they trump over, factual reality. And then you get the observers. So everybody, all these guys are saying the same thing. Right. So you get these large numbers of people that get together and go like, wait a second, this is what happened. Robert is one guy, Roberto Pedreira. Who the hell is Roberto Pedreira? They don't even know who the guy is. How does this guy be right? No one's going through footnotes. Right. No one's going through the bibliography. No one's going to go through sources like over hundreds of libraries all over the world. No one's going to, be in academia for 50 years to actually be able to actually pick it up. Oh, actually, my God, Roberto Pedreira actually knows what he's talking about. This is an elite academic doing us a favor here, people. Right. Probably no one reads his books. No one cares. But look at all these numbers. This guy's got 1 million likes. Clearly, he is on the side of truth. And then once again, you see factual reality, objective reality being sacrificed at the altar of democracy. You get these large numbers to get together, and that's the truth. But I mean, I reject that. I think that's insane. I think it's insane that people believe things because a large bunch of people are saying so. Like, well, what are the facts of the matter, people? And that's the other problem. People, it's a hard thing to do. Can you put your passions aside and look at something objectively and just go, what is happening here? Like free of ideology, free of politics, free of anger, free of love, free of anything. And it's incredibly difficult to do so. But that's the job of a historian. That's the job of a journalist. Right. One of the first things I noticed when I moved, because this is very ingrained in the American culture. I don't think Americans fully understand how insane this is because I grew up abroad, so I have a different perspective on these things. But when I moved to the U.S., I noticed that there was a right-wing press and a left-wing press, like liberal and conservative press. And I was like, wait, what? That was so odd to me. It was like, wait, how can a journalist be a conservative? How can a journalist be a liberal?
Because it's inherently not objective, like by design.
Of course. I mean, you're by design, and you're not going, wait a second. You can be a journalist or you can be a political activist. You cannot be both. You cannot be both. You're either a journalist or you're a political activist. When you're a historian, it's the same. You can't be a Marxist historian or an anti-Marxist historian. You can't. You can be one. You could be an activist or you could be a historian. You cannot be both. Right. You understand? So to me, these things are common sense. But they're so ingrained that people they see politics everywhere. So clearly, Robert's an anti-Gracie. It's like, what's anti-Gracie about? And I get goosebumps every time I see Royce Gracie in front of me. It's the only person I get starstruck. I've trained 6 UFC champions, bro. Yeah, I'm not lying. I've trained 6 UFC champions. I've trained a number of BJJ world champions. I've been around everyone in this business. I never get starstruck. Never impressed.
What is only person that when I see, what is it about Royce? To you, to you specifically, like to you as Robert, what is it about his presence that ignites that in you?
He started this journey, man. Like you read my chapter, you read my book. Like I was a frustrated teenager. I was a frustrated teenager, man. Like I was upset. I was angry. And then I rented those VHS tapes and I saw Royce beat. I think the first one I saw was him and Dan Severn. Yeah. And then he put him in a triangle. I was like, holy cow, this is insane. What is he doing? I don't know what he's doing, man, but that is beautiful. It's magical. I don't know what it is, but that's who I want to be. And I was in love with Jiu-Jitsu before my first class. I was committed to Jiu-Jitsu the day I saw Royce Gracie. He changed my life. He gave me purpose, man. Like he gave me, this is where you're going, Robert. I know exactly where you're going. It's thanks to him. So yeah, I get goosebumps when I see the guy. I'm impressed. So to call me anti-Gracie, I mean, it's coming from people that don't even read my book. Take the time to read the books.
That's the big thing. So and this I think it's true for anything that's long form, right? Anything that doesn't come in the form of a 30-second clip takes time. Like to listen to this full conversation that you and I are going to have, it's going to take someone an hour and a half. So if they click on the soundbite and they form their opinion solely off the soundbite, they will know nothing about the conversation. If you form your opinions solely off a soundbite, you don't read the book, you don't understand that there's a neutral tone here. There's an attempt to understand a history that exists from a neutral perspective. And it's important to remember, that, well, actually, I'm curious your thoughts on this. So the same way that Royce has this impactful experience on you when you're a kid, you're kind of looking for this outlet, right? And this thing connects with you at the right time. In my eyes, like, in the story world, right? That's like That's your hero. This person functions as a hero in your life. It's something to latch onto. You can wrap your head around it. You can aim for it. And jiu-jitsu is the medium in which you can express all of that. And you get latched onto this thing and it becomes your life. I think that to some degree, if we go back to this academy question, having Helio on the wall, it creates this story for people where like you're in the gi, you're tying your belt, you're looking at this guy. This guy is heroic. I mean, what does the church do, right? They put the cross and Christ right up there above the altar, so everyone who wants to sit down looks at it. It's this same thing, but it gives someone a story bigger than themselves to wrap their head around that brings them back every single day, while otherwise they're getting their shit kicked in, right? So how important do you think, being someone who understands history, right? And you've read plenty of historical texts, I'm sure, in it outside of the world of jiu-jitsu. How important are figures like Helio functioning in the growth of something like jiu-jitsu?
I think the myth is, and I'm not saying that Helio is a myth or his story is mythological. I'm not.
No, I
I'm
understand.
saying
Yeah,
about the myth of creation in a broader sense.
Yeah.
is something very important to people in general. I don't, like, to me, let's just assume here for argument's sake that like Jesus Christ never existed. Let's just for argument's sake. Is the Sermon of the Mount less meaningful because of that? I don't think so. Let's say Jesus was not God and he was just a good person. Right. Does the Sermon of the Mount, is it less impactful or less important because of that? I don't think so. Some people might, you say, the guy couldn't turn water into wine? Whoa, I'm no longer interested. I'm like, that's not the message, man. Pay attention. There are more important things here than these miraculous events. Okay, going back to jiu-jitsu, does Helio losing to Kimura detract from his role in the history? Not a moral victory. It was not a moral victory. Helio got mopped. No offense. I've been mopped before. You've been mopped before. People get mopped. Yes. It's just how this game is played, man. You're gonna lose, right? He got destroyed. It's a moral victory because you got to spin it in a way to make these guys look like heroic. You have to be. Yes, and it's the hero work. I said, dude, I've been reading all these biographies on Bruce Lee, right? I've read 4 of them now, like between books, his books and biography, the 3 biographies and the Tawe. I read them, right? Yeah. And I'm just not impressed. I'm just like, man, what is it about this guy that people are so impressed about? He had one fight as a teenager, an amateur boxing match, and then he never fought again. He had opportunities to do it in wrestling and judo and karate, and he's going to, pro wrestling first, like, it doesn't come to anything. You just like throw yourself in the fire, man. Like, I'm an actor, okay, but clearly that's what's important to you, right? Like, I'm just not impressed. But people look up to the guy, like, no, Bruce Lee could beat the UFC fighters. Like, Bruce Lee could not beat a blue belt in a fight, dude. Yeah, relax, man. There's no way, and it's not because he couldn't have. He was in a time where he didn't have the experience. And it's not his fault. It's just, to a degree it is. He could have fought. Like I said, he could have entered judo tournaments. He could have entered wrestling tournaments.
He would have lost, though. He would have lost.
Until he won. He would have lost and won. Like, eventually, if you stick to it, you can turn it around. I believe he had the physical ability to do it, let's say, right? But at the end of the day, his heart was in being an actor. That's what he did with his life. So he is an actor. It's like watching Van Damme and going, okay, you can believe it if you want. But like, the hero worship thing is a super powerful thing in people's minds. I dislike it. I personally, I don't need, like, I prefer the imperfect person. I think it's fine that Buchecha has lost. I think it's fine that Rogers lost. They're not less heroic to me because of it. I think it's fine how Flaw Mendes lost. So who cares? Oh, Hickson never lost. That's where he's the best. I'm like, yeah, but Hickson picked his fights his whole life. Who do you admire more? The guy who throws himself in the fire like Carlson Gracie, who fought Ivan Gomez. Ivan Gomez was like the John Jones of his time. There is Carlson, like 20 kilos lighter, putting up a fight, not a scratch on his face, fighting the man to a draw. Unbelievable. Never back down from and then people worship Hickson because he never lost. But of course, look at the guys he's fighting. That's not detracting from Hickson. He had his role, man. He is his hero in jiu-jitsu. But let's analyze these facts objectively, man. Like, who did what? And it's but people need the story, and I just don't see why that's relevant. Like, maybe, I don't know. Who am I? I'm one person, man. Most people need a story. I think the facts are great as they are. I think the facts are way more interesting than narratives.
Well, I think if you look to, you touch on this history of this like this circus element that jiu-jitsu had prior to its growth, and what it stemmed out of, pre-Vale Tudo, before it was like, hey, let's just let these guys do what they want to do and not have any constraints
Yeah.
around it, and let this be as real as it gets, right? Which ended up being, I think you quoted it in
Yeah.
the book as being the UFC's original motto, is like, as real as it gets, right? This is as real as it gets, without literally letting people, fully commit crimes here. And you go back to that, and there's a huge performative element to the circus, and then to even look at modern day wrestling, right? There's a reason why the WWE has a huge fan base and MMA has a huge fan base, and some of those people are the same, but a lot of them are different, right? Some like that. Bruce Lee's. I'm actually really glad you brought this up, because it was really interesting reading about jiu-jitsu through the 60s and the 70s, and then it's through the 90s. There's all these different waves of how jiu-jitsu came about, and one of them happens to contrast with this explosion in Hollywood of kung fu and karate movies. So if you go back to the 70s and 80s, and Bloodsport and Enter the Dragon and all these movies, they were just captivating people for some reason. There was people were enthralled by Bruce Lee. There's so many iconic photos and sequences that everyone still to this day references, young and old.
Yeah.
So there was something special about that. And it was special in the absence of real truth. He wasn't going and fighting people, in prime time in real bouts. It was fantasy, yet people loved it.
Yeah.
And now you have, it's one of the reasons I think that the UFC is so special, especially right now, is you have fighters in there that fit this hero role, and then you have some that don't. You got guys like Sean Strickland that he rubs everyone one way, right? But at the end of the day, he's kind of an everyman. And so people can wrap their head around that and go, wow, this guy's a fucking champion. And was formerly. And there's something special about that for the fan, for the consumer, because it takes these two worlds and it kind of does that for the first time, for real, ever.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And man, and people need here, like, Royce is not perfect. Of course he's not. But like, to me, he was the guy. It was like, that was the standard, that was the metric right there, man. Like, I gotta be where that guy is, and Bruce Lee did have his role, man. At the end of the day, he made martial arts, enormously popular,
Right.
Beyond just like, gyms and stuff. He brought it to the big screen. The world saw martial arts differently after Bruce Lee. So that he did do. He did that. I mean, he was a huge contribution. But, I mean, I think, but we can still look at the guy and go, at the end of the day, bro, you're an actor, you're not a fighter. Right. There's an abyss between Bruce Lee and Sean Strickland in terms of like who's a better fighter, or even anyone else in the UFC. No, it's not a small. We're talking an abyss between the two, but people don't get that. A lot of people, man, I've lost count of how many people argue with this, like that these guys in movies could do it, but. That was the beauty of jiu-jitsu to me, was that it's not about being pretty. It's not whether it's old or ugly, fancy. Does it work? And right. I still look at that as, this is why I am critical of a lot of modern, what is called modern jiu-jitsu or contemporary jiu-jitsu. Like, I look at it's beautiful. I think a berimbolo is just as beautiful as a spinning kick. Like one of those spinning kicks you saw in Van Damme movies are beautiful. So is a berimbolo. But the question is, does that work in a fight? It doesn't. So is it, why are we teaching it? Like, I mean, you can, sure, but so you can do nunchucks too if you like. Nothing wrong with nunchucks; they're beautiful.
Right.
But I don't know. It's just the martial arts and entertainment and have always been intertwined in a very strange way to me. I think, and when the submission only thing started, I didn't like the rule set right away because I knew where it was going. It was going back to cash rest,
stuff like that. Fight to win. Everything.
Well, it was the submission only format is basically catch wrestling. You remove positioning and you just put the submissions, right? There's a reason why BJJ became dominant over the years, because we taught, it was ingrained in the rule system to advance position, right? It was very smart of them to do that. But but people would say, but Robert, submission only is entertaining. And my answer to that was always like, who cares? Why does entertainment even matter? We're talking about a martial art here. We're not talking about, video games or movies. We're not talking about acting. We're not. Why does a martial art have to be entertaining? It's so strange to me that you have to, marry these two things. Like, why?
So
Why can't a martial art just be efficient?
to respectfully push back on here, and for sake of the conversation, I think one of the strong arguments that can be made for entertainment is the growth of it, right? Like, you own schools, you run businesses, so you understand that for those to make money and function and grow and present the opportunity to teach martial arts to others and for people to learn them, you have to have students coming in your door. And what things like WNO, Fight to Win, Flow Grappling, ADCC, Quintet, all these things do is they bring eyes to the sport, and you need eyes for someone to have that moment where they go, wow, I want to do that. Kind of like you had with Hoist. So I understand what you're saying about entertainment itself not being necessary to prove the functionality of the art form, but wouldn't you say that entertainment is an important part in the growth strategy and the spread of the martial art to get into more hands, more people, more eyes, more experiences?
I would say yes, as long as it doesn't detract from the efficiency. As long as the efficiency is in the driver's seat. As long as efficiency comes first, if a martial art happens to sell to everyone or not, to me that's a secondary thought. It's a side effect. But once you put entertainment in the driver's seat, and that's kind of the point I'm trying to put across the book, is that you lose exactly what made us special. What made us different was reality, wasn't entertainment. But once you replace reality with entertainment, you become what we used to criticize. You understand that one of the biggest contributions of the Gracie family to Jiu-Jitsu, in my opinion,
challenge matches,
was that it was
they proved it.
They proved it. They created a martial version of judo. Judo had become excessively sportive, especially after the war. The Gracie family, because we're going to do it different. We're going to bring reality back into it, and that thing was cooking in Brazil for half a century. No one paid attention. No one cared. And then it blew up in '93. The world sees it. What made Royce impressive was not that it was particularly beautiful. I mean, him winning as he won was beautiful, but the techniques itself, I didn't even understand them. I think a spinning kick is I couldn't even understand what he was doing. Right. But it was the fact that it was real. And I think that as long as reality is always in the driver's seat, if it's entertainment, that's perfectly fine. And I agree with you, it is for the better.
So you made a good point in our first conversation, and I reflected on it a lot, but thought about it. And it was about the reality of combat. And I've heard that you touch on this point in other discussions, but it's also reiterated in your book when you discuss Harrelson's kind of view, his tenets almost regarding jiu-jitsu, and I'll reference them in a bit here. But I wonder, so if we're to look at this and think of a way through, right? So outside of our criticisms, because I think that we're, with the exception of the entertainment thing, which we just talked through, I feel like we're pretty much in agreement here. How do these promotions come up with a rule set that helps jiu-jitsu grow in the way that we recognize is important, but continues to pay respect to this functionality, to the reality of combat, the fact that something might happen to you and you need jiu-jitsu to call for help, delay, establish a better position, run away, whatever it is. Do you think that there's a rule set that can showcase this? And then as a result, if that rule set grows, it changes what the schools do, right? Because schools function to the competitive circuit. So there's schools that focus heavily on IBJJF. There's some that have ADCC competitors, so they really only focus on that. I know schools here locally that they almost, within the last year, stopped training gi because they have guys that are going through all the ADCC trials. So the rule sets change, the schools do too. In your eyes, kind of your vision here, what would be a rule set or a structure that showcases the functionality and the realness, the truth of jiu-jitsu, but still gives it that entertainment opportunity to get in front of people?
I think what people are drawn to jiu-jitsu, with or without professional shows. I think that the gym's fun, but I agree that professional shows can bring it to more. It brings people into the community. The more people watch, the more they train. The more they train, the more they bring their friends in. So there's a side effect benefit. And I can think of my own rule sets. I have my own ideas of what would be a good rule set. Very many ideas, but I think the issue is as long as you they're all okay to me, as long as when the time comes, like, are we going to side with entertainment, or are we going to side with reality, efficiency?
Mhm.
And as long as we're always holding on to that standard of efficiency, I think we're always going to be going in the right direction. The thing is, the popularity often, tries to pull you, or the need for popularity pulls you away from reality, because it might be less entertaining. But I stand that credibility is more important than popularization. I think that keeping something credible, even if it's smaller, is more important than, making it popular. I was reading Pedrera's last book, and he made this analogy, so I'll borrow it from him. If everyone drove Ferraris, would they be special?
Oh, not at all.
And I'm like, I don't think so. No, they're special. Why are they special? Because no one has them.
Right, they're scarce.
What made Jiu-Jitsu special? There were so few black belts, and it was so hard to get one. And the standards were so high, and those guys were warriors. They were Spartans.
Right.
Right. And then if everyone has a black belt now, is it as valuable as it once was? So you saw the opening quote in my second book.
Yep.
I think that the standard is always going to be quality above, quantity. But, it's tempting, man. Like, I like money too. I'm not going to be a hypocrite saying I don't care about money.
Right.
Of course I do. But I think, for myself as an individual, yes, money, money, money. But for jiu-jitsu as an art, I think that obviously credibility is far more important.
You're good.
I do worry, man. I hope I don't come across as pessimistic, but you've seen this happen before. You've seen karate guys back in the 60s and 70s. They knocked themselves out in practice. It was live sparring, and it's changed a lot. Karate's changed a lot in the last 40 years. I do worry that we're going down the same path.
Have you seen that clip of the guy? He's like mouthing off about Aikido, about how Aikido's so important. It's so much more effective than Jiu-Jitsu and martial arts. And then the next sequence is like he went into some guy's gym, some MMA gym, and they did a sparring round. Have you seen this? It is.
Yeah.
It is marvelous. This guy, he goes on this rant, just kind of like filming himself about how Aikido's just number one, and it would beat Jiu-Jitsu because of XYZ, and it would beat this because you teach about getting out of the way and yada yada. And then the next clip, they ring the bell, and this guy throws just a body kick, rear leg kick, hits the guy in the liver, and it's down, and he's just like this, right? So it's instantaneously all this bullshit and mythological crap is just flipped up on its head by exactly what we've been talking about, reality, right? He's actually in there with a lion, and the lion did what lions do, and that moment probably changed that guy's life forever. I am really glad that you brought up black belts, because I want to know what your thoughts are on this. Like, does there need to be restructuring to belts? Does there need to be testing? It just seems like there are so many and so many more than there used to be, that it's the Ferrari example kind of to a T. You go to different schools and you travel around, and you are so quickly informed that there are levels to this. And that's levels outside of the competitive circuit, right? Then you got guys like in ADCC that are technically not even black belts competing and beating some of the most proficient people in the world. So this is, you push this timeline out 50 years, this is a problem for the credibility of the art form, period. How do we rope this back in? What do you do as an organization, as a martial art, to keep some semblance of like respect to the black belt?
I've thought a lot about this. First of all, I'm very thankful the IBJJF put a time limit on it. That was one of the big, it was a game changer. It was the biggest contributions they had to Jiu-Jitsu. They set a standard there. You cannot get promoted to black belt in 3 years, because that was happening. There was a minute there, people promoting junior black belts. We're starting to get black belts to children. But now it's good that we have an organization that is the leading organization in Jiu-Jitsu. Agree with them or not, it's good that that exists, because now we say, you cannot have standards now, right? You cannot get a blue belt in 6 months. You have to be trained for X amount of time. So like the time limit there was a great move by them. I'm thankful they did it. But it doesn't solve all the problems, because, as you mentioned, the level in some ways it's gone down a lot. In some ways it's gone up. At the elite level it's gone up, but on the average level I think it's gone down. If you got like a competent black belt in the 90s in Brazil, competent, not necessarily an elite guy, and you threw him in the UFC, he probably wouldn't win, but he put up a fight. I guarantee he put up a fight. Not in the UFC today.
Right.
The UFC in the 90s, proportionally, right? But I don't think that the average black belt today is capable of like putting up a fight in any setting, you know, let alone the UFC, you know, and it's unfortunate because I think that one way around this is, and it's an idea, there are others, is that you have a practitioner black belt, and you have a teacher black belt, and you have a fighter black belt. And there's 3 different layers here. You can be 2 out of 3 or 1 out of 3, but you're not automatically the same. I don't think that the average practitioner, like let's say there's a grandma who's been training and now she's 70 and she's promoted to Ward of the Black. I think that's really cool that she's training at 70. I think it really is. I think it's amazing. But I think that between her and Bushisha having the same rank, it was like, hold up. Are they really the same rank here? There's a difference. Right. I think it's awesome that grandma's training. I really do. But her and Bushisha are not equals. In no way are they equals. So there has to be some kind of like hierarchy there too. I mean, the belt was supposed to establish that hierarchy and experience, you know, but maybe one solution is, you know, like some people, a different black belt, or we don't hand out black belts with, unless you're like, I don't know. I think it's because none that's going to happen. We're just like speaking out loud here, but like, it's not going to happen. But those are things that I think would be helpful to keep the standard very high, because there's, other than the time, which is something, there's no other standard. You know?
Mm-hmm. Well, I like what you said about I think the 3 levels is probably the most interesting approach I've actually heard for this, because what you don't want to do is eliminate the possibility for the 75-year-old person who's completely challenging the mold of what it means to be 75, and they're demonstrating all these respectful martial artist qualities, and they're putting in the work, and they're showing up, and they're doing it in the absence of all their friends and people around them solely by age. To some degree, there is a black belt mentality in that person. They deserve to be recognized for their efforts, and it's inspiring and cool and awesome. But to your point, and this happened, it's a bell curve, right? Of you take Hoyler in 20 years from now, decorated beyond the most black belt competitor that there is, but there's an asymmetry there in ability because of age. So that is another type of recognition, right? And you can't devalue him for his contributions to the art form, but we also have to recognize that someone who's in their 60s or 70s is not going to compete with someone who's in their 25, 30-year-old, right? That's physiological.
No, trust me. I'm 42 and I can tell the difference, man. It's not the same. I can't imagine at 60 what it's going to feel like. You know, I don't want to imagine, but it's real. But I think.
Right. What is that? What does that feel like for you? Like, there's few people that you can. I mean, there's not few. There's a handful of you guys that have competed in the UFC. You've came up through jiu-jitsu. You were dedicating your time to jiu-jitsu before it was trendy on TikTok to do it, before you were taking post-class photos with your homies, right? You put in blood and sweat equity into this thing for a long time. And now in your 40s, you're older. You've been doing this for a long time. You feel the wear on the body. We're not built to do jiu-jitsu for 100 years. How do you grapple with, no pun intended, how do you grapple with the transition in aging as a grappler, as a literal fighter in your heart of hearts? Like, is that easy for you, or how do you walk yourself through that?
I spend about half my day battling with that internally. It's the biggest enemy I've ever had in my life. Like, it sucks. It sucks, man, because it's an identity crisis. It's everything. It's like, fuck, I used to be able to mock people on the mats. Now I need help getting off. I have arthritis on both my knees. My meniscus are gone, right? So imagine someone just put sand inside your knees, and now you got to move around with sand inside your knees. That's how I feel. You know, I lean on the wall when I get up sometimes, you know, like my legs don't push me up by themselves. And I'm 42.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it sucks. I do my best. I try to train, you know, as much as I can. I can't perform the way I used to. I think part of the reason is I was an idiot when I was training, too. Like, I thought he was going to be young forever. And, training 6 days a week. Every round was 1,000 miles an hour. It doesn't matter who it against. Like, it could be a white belt. Like, I just, and that I think made me a competitive guy. That was an asset. But it was like a credit card, right? Like, you're having fun with it, and then you look at the bill at the end, like, oh my God, did I really spend that much? And you're going through your statement, and it's just like, God, there's no way I spent that much money. Oh, you did. You did. It's real, and that's exactly how I feel about my body. I'm paying the bill now. I'm not happy about it. I was hoping modern technology would be moving a little bit faster than it is in the medical technology, and it's not moving that fast. I've tried stem cells. It's temporary. I've tried PRP, physical therapy. I think yoga and physical therapy are probably the most beneficial. But I don't know, man. Like, I deal with it.
So what are you dealing like? Is it do you have neck or knee, shoulder, wrist, everything?
I have 2 herniated discs on my neck, 1 on my lower back. I have osteoarthritis on both my wrists and both my knees. So that means I can't pull. My hands are very weak because I can't do this right here. I can't circle, not with strength, with no power, no strength, but like finishing a kimura, it feels like I'm wrist locking myself.
Yeah.
So very few submissions I can go for. Like, anything that's hard hand fighting is very painful, very difficult. My knees are like, I can't drive. So I'm passing guard. I have very little drive off my knees. If I'm in butterfly used to be my main position. It's hard to get that extension on the legs because I feel like I have sand inside my knees, So like little things like that. So,
right.
I work around it as best I can, man. But, the thing is, it's weird, man. Like, people don't respect you as much either if you're not whooping their asses. There's that too. It's true. It's real. It's real. People absolutely respect you when you mop the floor with them. You put them down, and like, what? And then you put them down, but that slowly disappears when you can't mop mats with them anymore. And then the question is, do you have the cojones to jump on the mats with them nonetheless? And, and then, because as I get older, pretty soon my purple belts will be beating me, right? There's no way around it. Or do I hide behind my Koro belt and I go, I'm never training again? Well, which one do you do? Because if you train, you got to get, wait a second, a Koro belt is getting mopped by a purple belt. How can he be our teacher? Maybe the purple belt should be our teacher, right? Because that's how people think.
But okay, this is, in essence, this is our whole conversation, right? Is this the functionality? Like, if you adjust the approach, if you could go way back in time, right? And you could kind of deprogram Robert to be not as balls to the wall every single second, and to function on these like very specific. I don't want to. I'll use Gracie combatives as like the framework here because I think that paints an easy picture. But is that version of Robert have more longevity in his career? Is he able to defend himself against younger people longer? So I guess what I'm getting at is part of this like the only choices that you have right now are, do I hide behind my purple belt, or do I get the floor mopped with myself and then I'm like getting in a wheelchair on the way home? Is that because of the style, because it's such a wrestling heavy high intensity style of jiu-jitsu that everyone practices?
I think that the more you step, if you drive, let's say you have a good car, like mechanics seem to like Toyotas. They say that, I'm not a mechanic, but they say Toyotas are great vehicles. But I guarantee you, if you drive a Toyota Corolla from LA to New York and you're stepping on the gas 100% of the time, even if it's a brand new one, it'll probably break down at some point. Right, because they can only drive so far. If you're going to step full throttle, like you're demanding too much of that vehicle. It's probably not going to make it. But if you stop and let it cool down, and check the tires, check the oil, you'll make it, right? But you're not going to make it in a rush. Right. When you're competing, you have a very small window, and you're trying to get as much in as possible. That is the price of competition. Is that you're prioritizing performance over health. Performance is more. That's why you train injured. When my students, they get injured, they stop. I don't say anything. Of course, you're injured. It's not a priority. You're an attorney. Why? But the ones that are competitors, I'm like, why aren't you training? Well, but I'm injured, coach. And I'm like, and as a coach, if you're in performance, you train injured, but that has a cost. So, I'm going to take time off every time I'm injured. Okay, good luck being a world champion then, because you're not going to make it. I'll tell you that right now. The people who make it are the people who push through. Now, there are people that are genetic freaks. I'm not going to mention names, but I know for a fact there are people that are multiple time world champions, and they train 3-4 times a week. I know these people. They're freaks of nature. I'm not one of them. Most people aren't. There are the John Jones of the world. There are people in jiu-jitsu, and I know this for a fact. They were like partying and drinking the night before till 3-4 in the morning. They wake up and win a national title the next morning. It's unbelievable. But those are the exceptions. Like most humans can't do that. I could, and I had to be 100% invested, and I didn't go as far as I'd like, but I did something. But it was not talent. It was not talent. It was will. I know that, and I'm being sincere here. I'm not being arrogant. But there's just no way around it.
Do you think that if you went back, and I the reason I am pushing so much on this is because I think that this is something a lot of people are going to face later, even on the hobbyist level. And I'm facing this right now with a recent neck injury that has me seriously sidelined and had me questioning my return to jiu-jitsu and what it would look like. I'm going to find a way and work with the right people to make that happen because it's important. But I wasn't expecting to have that conversation with myself. And I'm a very able-bodied, physical, somebody who's been training for 10 years of their life and competed in other sports, right? I'm not prone to these type of things. But it happened. And this happens to people. And jiu-jitsu, at the end of the day, is fucking hard on your body, man. It is brutal, no matter whether you're a world-class competitor or a hobbyist. And so when I talk to people that have been doing this a long time, I'm always curious, like if you could go back and restructure how you were training and your intentions, would there be a way to do that without sacrificing the levels that you got to? Or do you think that's the only way to get it done?
I think there's definitely a smart way to do it. I think that the one thing I would have done different is I would have done more flow rounds and like more less intensity, but not 100% intensity. Maybe go at 70% and more movement, less impact. I think you should have impactful rounds, at least, one round a day. I mean, I heard it. I don't know how true this is because I've never trained with Dagestani wrestlers. I heard their practice goes on for like 3 hours plus. And most of the time they're just play wrestling. Once a week they go to war. And I think that there's a reason why a lot of judokas and wrestlers, because judo and wrestling are worse than jiu-jitsu when it comes to impact. Same thing with Muay Thai.
For sure.
Way worse.
For sure.
So, but those guys don't spar as much as we do. If you look at actual live sparring, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has a very, very high mat time of live sparring, probably more than wrestling, judo, or Muay Thai. But what they do a lot is they do a lot of live drilling, like the kind of like dynamic drilling that gives them a skill set, but the impact is controlled, so you're less prone to injury, right? It's less fun. It's a lot more boring. Jiu-jitsu is a commercial martial art, so you have to cater to the customer. The customer doesn't want to drill 1,000 throws; they want to roll. But I think that the live rolling accelerates aging more than the live drilling does because you can control the impact in a way that live sparring does it. Like Muay Thai guys don't spar hard every day. Point. They would have even shorter careers if they did.
Right, and they're doing like 160 fights, and that they have that wear on your body is just insane.
They're saving their health for the fights because if they did the same in practice every day, there wouldn't be anything left for the fights. So I think that's the way of doing it. I think that you have to be careful not to cross the line where you're just making excuses not to go hard because there's a thin line there. You got to be honest with yourself. It's like the day you're slacking because you're injured, is slacking because you're lazy. Sometimes it's easy to rationalize it and go, I'm a hardcore guy, but I'm going to skip practice for the whole week because my thumb hurts. And you're just being lazy. Or the opposite too can happen. You can go, no, man, I'm just being a bitch. I should go to practice. And you have you can't even move your back. You're walking into the gym like this. Like, no, bro, you really need a week off. Right? Because it depends on what kind of person you are.
And it's also important that person asks themselves, what are you doing this for? Do you want to be a world champion or do you want to get 3 days of exercise a week? Because if you answer those honestly, you'll know how you need to respond to that
100%,
question. Because
100%.
if you want to be a world champion, you need to get the work in, and you will be selective.
And that's the crux of the matter here. Like, what is your purpose? Like, are you just trying to have fun with this and have a good time and be functional and be competent when it comes to defending yourself, basic fitness? Like, yeah, then don't go 1,000 miles an hour. Take days off. Do 3 rounds a day, man. 4 max. Like, don't go crazy. Don't train with the animals. Avoid the animals. Every gym's got a couple animals. Avoid that. That's the D1 wrestler. Is the clueless 22-year-old. You know, like, avoid those guys. You know, and then stick to the people your own age group and weight class, and you know, and go easy, take breaks. You know, and then you're going to get all that. But if you're looking at performance, you can't think that way. You have to go at the animal and go like, I'm going to be a bigger animal than you. Like that's what you have to do. And it's a super. And then it's like a credit card. you got to pay the price later. There's no way around it.
That's the best example, man. It's so well put. I'm surprised I haven't thought of that before. Like that really paints the picture so well of the trade-off of short-term enjoyment for long-term debt. You mentioned this cool 21-year-old wrestler. There was this part in the book. You talk about Bob Anderson and his role as a wrestler and how this kind of interweaves with the Gracies. And I'm curious if you could just touch a little bit on, and I ask this because wrestling is, I think, becoming more and more appreciated by the everyday jiu-jitsu practitioner, right? Yeah. Not only are we seeing this in the, I feel like if you go back to UFC up through 100, you have Joe Rogan just shouting jiu-jitsu from the rooftops. Daniel Cormier comes in later, and now you have this new appreciation from the color commentary on wrestling. So I only say that just for the contrast, but it's just showing that wrestling is such an important component, especially in mixed martial arts, where they're starting standing. It's a really important part of the exchange and the control of your opponent. But now you're starting to see different academies asking for it. Some are putting a wrestling coach in the academy to have dedicated wrestling days where you're working on takedowns, control body positions, and then seeing where jiu-jitsu fits into that process. But this part of the book, how important were wrestlers, real wrestlers, not just show wrestlers, but real wrestlers in the growth of jiu-jitsu and then this transitionary period?
I think they were jiu-jitsu and judo's original rivals. That was, I'm reading Pedreira's new trilogy now, the evolution of modern jiu-jitsu. The evolution of modern jiu-jitsu. It's volume 2 just came out, and I just finished reading it like a couple days ago. And it's talking about the history of jiu-jitsu and the rivalry of judo / jiu-jitsu with wrestling and catch wrestling, and how that world eventually turned into WWE eventually. But it started in the 1920s, 30s, and it's super interesting. Like we had these events were selling. They had 10,000 spectators. 10,000. I don't think we have ever had that in jiu-jitsu today. 10,000. 1930s they had 10,000 spectators. We're talking about fight purses of $47,000 in today's money. Like it was a huge scene. Wow. This is during the Depression, and these people were still filling up as a stadium with 10,000 people, right? So it was super popular. But I think wrestling was a bit of a wake-up call to a lot of these judokas because they were losing a lot to wrestlers. A lot, because they get taken down. Mm-hmm. They get taken down, and this is at a time where leg attacks were not illegal in Kodokan Judo and Jiu-Jitsu. Later they banned it. I want to say sometimes in the 1940s. I can't remember for sure, but earlier in the century they were legal, right? But Jiu-Jitsu guys were losing a lot to wrestlers. So I think that the rivalry that's your best friend. If you're looking at performance, your best friend is not your training partner. It's your training partner is in the sense he's an opponent, right? Like as a rival, right, as an enemy. That's the guy that's going to force you to elevate the bar. So I think that was wrestling's biggest influence in jiu-jitsu, is always keeping it in check. It's like, and I think in general, jiu-jitsu was lost out. Jiu-jitsu is a more complete martial art than wrestling. In general, it has everything wrestling has plus more, a lot more. But the biggest thing I think is the primacy of the top position, which is a better position in a fight, no way around it. And the other thing is wrestling has always made an effort to keep things very simple. They never cared about being fancy. Like wrestling is you talk to wrestling coaches and just like, yeah, we're going to work 6 things over and over and over again. Like find me a jiu-jitsu gym that's not learning 6 new things every day. It's like 6 things a day. Nor
are the members privy to that type of repetitive, boring.
That's the thing.
It's not fun for them, so they don't want to do it.
You just said the key word, fun. It's a commercial practice, so fun is important, right? So if my own gym, I've picked fights with my students before, and they want to learn berimbolo, and bro, you can't even shrimp. I have white belts trying to do boogie chokes. They don't know how to shrimp. They want to do a boogie choke. They saw it online. It's the problem with the internet, right? It's flip the hierarchies upside down. Right. There's no more authority. There's no more hierarchy. Yeah. There's no more, order of importance. It's just like whatever the algorithm spits out, like that's the best. And it's detracting from the student's ability to learn and my ability to teach. It's a huge problem in jiu-jitsu. Just I think we should have a central curriculum like judo has. At least you solve the problem of what the basics are, because right now it's not clear. It's not clear. People go online and they want to learn the cool stuff, but I'm like, yeah, man, but that's like the simple stuff is the one that works. Like the AK-47 is an efficient gun. I'm not a gun lover, but everyone knows AK-47 is a pretty efficient gun. It fires, from what I hear at least, underwater, in the snow, in the desert. It's just a reliable gun. And it was a simple weapon. That was why. The Glock is the same way. Like, my point is, simple things are less likely to break. But I think people are so obsessed with the fancy that they're adding so many layers to the technique to make it look cool that they're forgetting that the more elements you add to this position, the less likely it is to work. And I think that is wrestling has been its advantage over jiu-jitsu, that they kept it simple. They never try to complicate it, just the stuff that works. And the metric is always efficiency in wrestling, primarily because it's not a commercial practice. That is wrestling's real advantage, is that there's no money in it. The day wrestling, because wrestlers complain about this all the time, there's no money, yada, 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 sure. But the day you put money, the big wrestlers are making money from teaching wrestling, it turns into a commercial practice. You watch, it's going to deteriorate. It's going to go down. I think that what keeps it strong.
It's interesting too.
Go ahead. No, I made my point.
Is you have guys like Gable Steveson and these wrestlers that are becoming prominent public figures, which I think is new for wrestling in the last 50 years maybe, where these are major athletes now, some of them. Jordan Burroughs, not all of the wrestlers on the roster, and of course 2 athletes in a pool of however many they are, that's not a very good percentage of people actually making a good living of the total workforce. But just the fact that they are doing that, and you're seeing rising numbers of levels of kids in high school enrolling in wrestling programs all over the country, is pretty cool to see. But they do have to solve that problem eventually. Is how do you make this, and not to say, to be fair, not to say that jiu-jitsu has solved this at all. You're not making money as a grappler for a couple, decades. But if they can solve that, and there's real money behind the sport, that could be pretty incredible.
I think that as long as it's government funded, they're going to have a hard time. No one wants to pay for anything that's free. I'll give you an example. If you go to Scandinavia, it's heavily government funded sports. Boxing, judo, wrestling, everything. You have a hard time you can do it. But in the beginning, you ask any jiu-jitsu instructor in these countries, they'll tell you it had a hard time because people weren't used to paying for martial arts. It's like they're used to, because especially if it's something the an Olympic sport, because government's funding it. So why would you pay for something I had for free in high school for 4 years? Right? Like, they used to having it for free. If I give you something for free every day, it loses value. And it's a problem. It's a catch-22 kind of, issue. It's kind of a paradox, because you can't have it both ways. The more commercial it becomes, the more you're going to water it down. The more you democratize it, the less credibility it will have. The less value it will be. The more Spartan you make the practice, right, the fewer people you'll have, but the quality is going to go up in general, right? The culture is going to be superior. And it's a balance, right? Martial arts has always been, striving for this balance in between these things, but it's an old story. I don't think it's, I think wrestling, I think I met some really competent wrestlers in my life, and it's a shame that they're not doing better financially, because I'm like, they have like regular jobs now. It's like, wow, man, you're so good. How can you not have your own school? And it's like, and you have jiu-jitsu to compete with. You can't compete with it. It's the popular thing to do now. But I think wrestling has benefited tremendously from the UFC and, from jiu-jitsu, if anything. For sure. And I think they're living a better moment now than they were prior to Royce Gracie, for sure. But I think that's it's kind of a shame that there's not a bigger outlet for wrestlers other than the UFC right now, because they're very competent, athletes.
and hardworking.
Very hardworking.
When you look to, if you look to the future here, given your understanding of the past, which makes you an interesting candidate to consider the future, because you actually know a lot about the past of jiu-jitsu. Where do you think jiu-jitsu is headed in the next 20 years? And on top of that question, do you feel like there's a way to save this functionality of it through that growth process?
I think the functionality thing is, I mean, not to toot my own horn, I'm one of the few people who talks about this. I mean, people talk about old school jiu-jitsu and self-defense, but I don't like that argument for self-defense, because most self-defense to me doesn't work. I mean, the standard is MMA. You want to find out how to defend yourself, MMA. Like right hand, left hook, double leg, single leg, guillotine, kimura, rear naked choke. Keep it simple. You know, but I think that to answer your question, I think it's going to continue to grow. It's going to, if it's not the most popular martial art in the world, it's very close to being. It has to be. You know, I know judo is still huge, but like judo is losing a lot of ground to jiu-jitsu and very quickly. When you want proof, they've modified the rules recently to allow more ground time. Like, you're going to tell me that's not an influence of their concern, at least for Brazilian jiu-jitsu's growth?
Right.
They see it as a major threat, and I think they're already behind. But if they're not, they're going to be very soon. It's just a matter of time. But I think that some of the quality will be lost in time. I think that's the question. That's a great challenge jiu-jitsu has ahead of it. Ahead of the art is can we maintain the credibility? Well, you know, because I mean, I'm sure you want to bring it to the whole world. I think that's important, but you want to bring a good quality product to the whole world. If by the time it reaches the whole world, it's already become something completely devoid of any credibility, have we really won the war? Like, is that really an achievement? Like, what did you give people? Everyone has a Ferrari now. Like, what did you give people? You want to give them value, and value requires hardship. It's got to make it harder, not easier. Right. So yes, the time that IBJJF has, like the standard of time, that's been a great move. But I think there should be some other standards. Like, there's got to be some other ways of like measuring progress, and it's hard to do, man. Because I thought of one.
It's hard.
I'm going to give you a highly controversial one here, and I'm going to pick some fights here, but I think it's a good measure.
Go for it.
I think you should measure body fat. I think that people that are like
body fat.
Yeah, I think that if you're too obese, you got to lose weight before you get promoted. That's a good standard. I mean, being healthy, being obese is not good for you. It's unhealthy. I mean, I have friends that are overweight. I'm not trying to pick a fight with anyone, please, guys, but I think that's the metric, because it's better that you're healthy. Being healthy is better than unhealthy, right? And I think it'll give people the incentive to lose weight.
True, but couldn't you be let's say you have like a high BMI, or you're categorized as obese. I'm also, by the way, not disagreeing with you that being obese is completely unhealthy. And if that is the case, you should seek help in reversing that. But it could be argued that someone could be proficient in jiu-jitsu to the highest degree and be overweight at the same time, right?
Absolutely.
So is that, how would that metric change the quality of the product?
Because as much as I am a fan of performance, and I think performance is the high, I mean, that's what we do. This is to be better, right? To be better tomorrow than we are today, and to be improving, a constant state of improvement, right? That's the goal. At the same time, you know, I think that there are some other things that we ought to be teaching, and one of them is discipline. One of them is accountability, courage, you know, like loyalty, hierarchy. Like, these are values. I mean, they used to be like standard martial arts values, but I think they kind of lost some ground so much so that we don't talk about them anymore. I talk about accountability in my gym every day. You know, I talk about discipline every day. You know, I think these things are important. It's hard to teach because you're supposed to learn them at home. And then the society reinforces it. The laws reinforce it.
That's right? Not happening all over.
It's very ambitious to ask a martial arts studio of my own to change the way people think, you know, when they have TikTok, YouTube, and, you know, mass culture, sometimes bad parenting, telling them you can do whatever you want. You're a free person. You can do whatever you want. Just be happy. Live your best life. Yada, 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 yada. Comfort. I'm like, okay, but you have a society of very weak people when they don't have the will to actually, you know, put a stop to things. If this is hurting me, you should be able to put a stop to it. And I think jiu-jitsu should be teaching that. That's part of what we do, is teaching hard lessons.
So maybe a change in the values.
A change. The biggest loss in jiu-jitsu, I mean, you read my book, man. To me, it's not the change. Like, the techniques are great. I think there's so many good things about, you know, jiu-jitsu's evolution. But the loss of values has been the biggest loss. Like, it was unthinkable to blame someone other than yourself when you lost. I've seen coaches like smack people in the head when they lost. I'm not suggesting we should go back to that, but like, the point was, I'm like, you're a fucking idiot. Like, you blame the student. If the student put his head down and go like, yes, master, yes, master. You know, it was like, it's a different world. I'm not that people should do that, but I'm just saying it's an extreme example of how far we have come, because people lose now and they blame everyone except themselves. And I think the loss of accountability has been huge. I'll give you another one. Promoting yourself was an embarrassment. It was embarrassing. You didn't promote yourself.
Wait, why do people do that? Why do people do this? It's the weirdest thing.
Promoting themselves?
Yeah.
It's the fastest way to make money. We're a civilization obsessed with money, man. We put money above everything. Money is the highest value. You tell people that Kim Kardashian's not successful, and they lose their minds. She's a billionaire. And I'm like, oh, okay. What did she do to become a billionaire again? Released a video of her doing what? Is that success to you? You want your children doing that? Is that what you teach your daughters? How to perform oral sex on like rappers and then release the video online to make? Is that a metrics of? Is that the kind of world you want? You want a village for your children to grow up in when everyone does that to make money? Is that what you want? You think that's pretty? You think that's something to applaud? You think those are good values? Who believes that? But people say, oh, but she made money. And then you see people applauding Pablo Escobar, but Pablo Escobar was rich. I've seen kids wearing Pablo Escobar T-shirts. It's crazy. Think about it. It's like the man was a monster.
There.
He's a monster. But like we live in a time where I feel like if you make money, everything is allowed. It's the only thing that matters. Like, hold up. I'm not saying I'm an angel. I'm not saying I don't like money. But there are more important things, right? There has to be. Can't be just like
Well, maybe within the walls of the academy. I mean, this is something that I think is very tangible within jiu-jitsu, within martial arts, is to have a value system. It would be nice if it was universal, but in the event that it's not, you can have a value system in your academy. And this is very apparent as someone who travels a lot and will drop in, provided I'm welcome at different academies all over the world. It's fun to go to different places, but it's also really interesting to go to different places because you see, you experience the vibe the second you walk in. And there's places where it's very respectfully structured, I would say, where it's not annoying. It's not like they're making you do dunce stuff because you're the new kid, but it's like, line up, be on time, bow, thank your partners, like very baseline, just kind of things. And then you see places that are walking off the beach in your board shorts and your t-shirt, and it's like, it's chill, and that's cool because it works for some people. But when you have all these different types of the same thing being offered, we look back on this whole conversation and take into account everything that we touched on, the 2 books, your history, your lifetime committed to this, and we revisit this idea of the academy with the pictures on the wall. Who are the correct photos to have on the wall, if any, and who would you place on that wall?
In my gym, man, I have my instructors, the people who trained me. And I mean, I had a lot of instructors over the years, but the ones that did the most for me were Steve Da Silva, Paulo Strecker, Terere, and Leonardo Vieira. I've had others, Gustavo Dantas, John Lewis, Otávio de Almeida. Like, I've had many instructors in my life, but the ones that feel like influenced me the most, those are the ones that I have on the wall. But I think there's the whole thing about lineage. The thing about lineages is, I think it's a way of like people saying, I honor my past without actually bothering learning anything about it. It's very easy to go, I honor my past. I'm honoring our forefathers. But there's no, okay, but do you know anything about this past? Like, no. It's like, okay, because that actually has an effort. It's almost like a lazy way of saying I appreciate the origins of jiu-jitsu. Like, no, you don't. Because if you did, you'd be reading Roberto Pedreira's books. Right? That's what you'd be doing. Right? But I think that's, I think I started my first book with this lineage question because it's the 100% of the story is Maeda's relationship with Carlos. If you ask someone 10, 15 years ago, what is the history of jiu-jitsu? And they would tell you the story of Carlos and Maeda, right? That was 100% the story. So I started questioning that. But the more I think about it, I think the less significant it is. Not the relationship itself, which is for itself a whole topic of discussion, but the lineage thing is, it's very arbitrary, because
what is a martial art? How does it evolve? Who are the people responsible? Like Jigoro Kano got all the credibility or the credit for being the founder of judo, and he was, but he didn't do it alone. There were a lot of other people there. I've been reading Kano's works, and I've been reading, some other works that, the people that discuss Kano's history. It's like, man, there's a lot of people involved in the history of judo. Kano is just like the head figure. It's like saying that the civil rights movement was all about Martin Luther King and no one else. I'm like, hold up, man. There were many people then who were doing a lot for the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King was just the head figure. So there's all that, man. But to answer your question, first of all, Maeda was not a student of Jigoro Kano. You know that, right? He never trained with Jigoro Kano. He was a Kodokan member, but he's a third generation, so he was never under Kano directly. So there's that. The relationship with Carlos and Maeda is unconfirmed. There's no evidence for it. People get angry when you say it, but it's the truth. It's a methodological statement. It's not a political one. If there ever is something, I'll correct I'll add a footnote in the second edition. I'll be happy to correct it. I'll be happy for the discovery. But I actually, what I practice is what the world, knows as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's an art that is grounded in reality. It is designed for MMA and a real fight. It carries with it values that I admire, or used to carry at least values of respect, camaraderie, honor, accountability, courage, discipline, loyalty to your coach and your team and all these things. And I stand by those values. I think those values are superior than the ones we're teaching at the moment. And I like the beach culture, the relaxed manners on the mats. It's one of the reasons why I fell in love with jiu-jitsu. That's where my friends are. I think that's a huge appeal, a huge reason at least why so many people are attracted to Brazilian jiu-jitsu is that because of those relaxed manners, right? And the competitiveness, I love the friction of someone trying to beat me, I'm trying to beat them, and the quantity of techniques and the different ways you can approach a problem. But I think that when I put all of these elements together, the person who best represents this jiu-jitsu that I'm describing you was Carlson Gracie. And you read the book, I really place Carlson at the head of everything. I'm not saying he was inventor of anything. No one invents anything. I'm saying that, and I'm not the first person to say this, but I think that no one in the history of jiu-jitsu has done more for jiu-jitsu than Carlson. I think more than his father, more than his uncle Helio. I think that the closer you look at Carlson's biography, the more it becomes obvious that this is the guy who did it. Fought the best fighters of his time that were available, never run from a challenge. Trained the best fighters in Brazil for 3 to 4 decades. Best team in Brazil by far was his. He had an enormous impact in the culture of jiu-jitsu and the way people train jiu-jitsu, the way people, like those relaxed manners is very descriptive of Carlson's methods, and I'm going to say something here that people don't want to say, but I'm not, but people will tell me a lot. There's a lot of things that people told me in these interviews. They were like, bro, please cut that out. Don't put it. I'm just telling you, but don't put it in the interview. So I did, but you get to learn a thing or two about Holz's relationship with Carlson. And Holz was not the guy he became until he started training with Carlson. He was not doing great against Carlson's students. You saw in the book, Hickson Gracie, who was the best guy, in that generation. He was getting tapped by Carlson's purple belts in practice. So there's a lot of things about jiu-jitsu in the 80s that people like, is a lot of propaganda there. Like the story is a little bit different. You look at the results and you looked at who was doing what and who was fighting who. You're like, hold up, guys. There's a lot more to this story. And I think Carlson was the man. Like, I just don't see a way around that. I think Hollis was basically copying what he did. You can argue that he did it better, sure. But he was copying something that was not being practiced inside the original Gracie Academy. Hollis was practicing something that was started by Carlson at the Figueiredo Academy. So Hollis falls under Carlson's lineage. If we're going to talk about lineages, Hollis, he might have spent more time at the Gracie Academy, but he ended up teaching using the same model Carlson had used, the same kind of jiu-jitsu that Carlson had used. People went on to follow after that. All his students, including the original Gracie Academy, originally switched over to Carlson's models because it was working better. It was more appealing. You could teach more people. The beach culture it had all these elements that made it more appealing to the average person, right? Like the Helio Gracie model still survives. It still exists. And, there are gyms that follow that model, the self-defense private lesson model. I'm nothing against it. I think it's fine if people prefer that. But I think we can all agree that the kind of jiu-jitsu that took over the world was not the self-defense slash private classes model. It was the group classes with the relaxed manners, with the the high intensity training and the creativity of positions and the freedom to to develop and create. And that world was created by Carlson Gracie.
Well, for all the reasons that you just said and many more, it's one of the reasons I think that people should really take some time, and especially if you're practicing jiu-jitsu, if you're involved in the art form at all, but read this book, read Open and Close Guard, and the two together actually function very well. But it more than anything, it will just open your eyes to another part of the story that was happening, did happen, but you probably don't know about. And that's what made the book so exciting for me to read. And they'll challenge the way that you think about something that you spend, 3 to 4 days a week doing. And I think that any kind of literature, any kind of book that makes you see things that you do commonly through a different lens are important. So I really appreciate you, one, taking the time to put forth such thorough researched books like this, Robert, but also taking the time to come back on the show and talk about them. So thank you so much for being here, man.
It was a pleasure, man. Thanks for having me. Just one final thing before I go.
Yeah.
I hope I didn't offend anyone. It's not personal. I make statements like that, and like going back to the people that are very passionate about certain things, and I don't mean to offend anyone. My objective was never to do that, but I think sometimes if you're gonna try to be truthful. I'm not saying I am always truthful, but I try to. Then you're gonna sometimes you're gonna pick some quarrels here and there, but that's not my intention. I don't want to make any enemies. I don't want to offend anyone. I'm just trying to, be as fair as I can be and speak my mind, and in the process, sometimes you upset some people, but I'm sorry if I did.
Indeed. Well, thank you, Robert.
Hey friends, Abe here. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode and sticking around to the very end. If you want to support it, leave a 5-star review on Spotify or check out www.maynideapodcast.com. Join the mailing list and stay up to date on all things The Mayn Idea, from future guests, sponsorship opportunities, products that I'm using to help me perform at my best, invites to ask me anything, and any upcoming pertinent information to the show. I cannot do this show without you. It is literally why I show up each week and put these episodes together. So thank you from the bottom of my heart from being part of the community. I hope you have a great day.